She thought it was just another dusty storage auction until she pulled the tarp back. Hidden inside was a military-grade vehicle, with no markings, no keys, and no history. But as she began to uncover its secrets, she realized this wasn't just a forgotten machine. It was a story the government may have tried to erase. What began as a gamble became the most dangerous restoration of her life. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this give you chills, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode reveals something even more unbelievable. The sun hit differently out in the valley that morning, low and hot, throwing long shadows across the cracked pavement of a forgotten industrial lot. Samantha Hayes tightened her ponytail, adjusted her leather gloves, and stepped through the iron doors of Unit 186. The auctioneer hadn't known much about it, just that it had been seized by the county after years of unpaid rent. Could be junk, could be gold, he'd said with a shrug. Most bidders had passed. But Samantha, with her gut instincts and grease-stained jeans, had seen something in the photos. A bump in the tarp. A shape that didn't belong in any ordinary storage unit. She'd placed the winning bid, $712 and change. Now, the air inside was thick with heat and old dust. Her boots crunched over gravel layered with age. The only thing in the entire unit was the tarp, a massive, olive-drab sheet draped over something hulking. Her breath caught. The tarp wasn't just big, it was military. Heavy, canvas-bound, with reinforced seams and faded stenciling that had long since rubbed away. She reached out, fingers brushing the edge. It flinched, not literally. But something about the way the tarp shifted in the breeze sent a shiver through her arms. Like the thing beneath wasn't just waiting, it was watching. She crouched and grabbed the corner. With a single pull, she peeled it back just enough to reveal what lay underneath. A nose cone, rounded and green, with flecks of camo paint and a reinforced steel bumper that looked built to ram through walls. The tire beneath it was half buried in dust, but thick, off-road, military grade. Her pulse picked up. This wasn't a truck, it wasn't even a tank, it was something else. Samantha stepped back slowly, staring. The vehicle stretched deeper into the unit, wide and low, like a hybrid between an armored personnel carrier and something out of a sci-fi film. No logos. No plates. No rust. Just pure silence and steel. She pulled her phone from her pocket, snapped a photo, and stood in the quiet hum of her thoughts. This wasn't salvage. It wasn't scrap. It was a question, wrapped in secrets, buried under canvas, and left for someone else to forget. She was that someone. Samantha turned back to the vehicle. Dust swirled around her boots, kicked up by the breeze funneling through the open doors. She knew she should call someone, the cops maybe, the auction house. But something in her gut told her not to. This thing had been left here for a reason, and whoever hid it hadn't come back. She stepped forward again, eyes narrowing. "Well," she muttered, placing a hand on the cold, dented steel. "Let's see what kind of story you've been dying to tell." And with that, the tarp came down. It took Samantha nearly an hour to pull the entire tarp free. Dust exploded into the air with every drag, turning the sunlight at the unit's entrance into a haze of golden fog. But when it finally cleared, she saw it fully, and the breath left her lungs. The vehicle was unlike anything she had ever seen. Longer than a Humvee, lower than any APC she'd worked on, and sleeker than it had any right to be. It sat heavily on 4 oversized wheels, with deep tread patterns she didn't recognize, like it was built for terrain that didn't exist on any map. The windshield, if you could even call it that, was a narrow strip of darkened polyglass, fused seamlessly into the armored body. And the doors? None. Not even hinges. No VIN. No badging. Not even a stamped number beneath the frame where every vehicle by law should have one. It was like someone had built this thing to be invisible, not just off-grid, but off-record. Samantha crouched down beside it, fingers brushing the seam where the rear panel met the body. It was too perfect. The welds were nearly microscopic, Whoever made this didn't just know engineering. They had mastered it. She grabbed her pry tool and gently wedged it into a faint line near the front. With a soft hiss, pneumatic, controlled, deliberate, the panel cracked open. Cold air escaped from within, chilled despite the heat outside, and carried with it the sharp scent of lubricant, metal, and something else. Ozone? She stood frozen. That smell, it reminded her of the inside of a battery, or the tang in the air, just before lightning strikes. Samantha leaned closer and peered into the compartment. Inside was a dense grid of black tubing, compact nodes, and what looked like carbon fiber-wrapped modules with embossed numbers and barcodes, all in a format she didn't recognize. It was more than electrical. It was hybridized. Power delivery systems that didn't belong in ground vehicles, at least not any she'd seen. Not civilian, not even military. "What the hell are you?" she whispered. She backed away slowly, the weight of the discovery starting to settle in her bones. This wasn't some forgotten prototype. It wasn't a relic. It was a ghost. She stood at the entrance of the unit again, looking down the length of the strange vehicle. The late afternoon sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the frame. It didn't just feel abandoned. It felt buried, like it was never meant to be found, like someone had hidden it here not to preserve it, but to erase it. But why? Samantha's phone buzzed. It was a message from her friend Vince, a mechanic and ex-Air Force technician who owed her more than a few favors. She typed back one sentence. "Need your eyes. You've never seen anything like this." She attached the photo she'd taken earlier, and as she watched it send, a strange thought crept into her mind. Not fear, not regret. Just this. Whatever she had just uncovered wasn't finished with its story. It was just beginning. By the time Vince rolled up in his rusted pickup the next morning, Samantha had already hauled the vehicle onto her trailer and parked it behind her shop. She hadn't slept much. Spent most of the night brushing dust from seams, photographing internal panels, and flipping through every military vehicle manual she owned. None of them matched. Not even close. Vince stepped out, sunglasses low on his nose, coffee in one hand, curiosity in the other. He paused mid-step when he saw it. "Okay. That's not what I was expecting," he muttered. Samantha didn't respond. She just nodded toward the thing, now sitting under a canvas tent she'd rigged up in the backyard. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the tarp above, casting shifting patterns over its smooth, scarred frame. Vince walked around it slowly, one hand dragging along the body like he was reading it in Braille. "This isn't standard Army issue," he finally said. "Not even special ops. I've worked on stealth mods before, and this is something else." "You ever seen materials like that?" she asked, pointing to the undercarriage. He dropped to one knee. "Carbon-silicon blend. Maybe even boron composite. And these shocks," he tapped the suspension arms, "they're adaptive, probably magnetoriological. That's black budget stuff, Sam. Experimental tech. Prototype level. So why would it end up in a seized storage unit?" Vince looked up, eyes serious now. "Only 2 reasons. 1, someone wanted it gone. 2, someone wanted it forgotten." Samantha crossed her arms. "Well, they failed. It's in my yard now. They spent the day cataloging the visible systems. The rear drive motors weren't standard combustion. They were something between electric turbines and hydraulic generators. The cockpit, once pried open using a winch and patience, revealed a dark, tech-packed interior. No steering wheel, just a central control sphere, an interface console, and a blank screen. No ignition port, no visible power source, and no manual, just silence. Heavy and intentional. By late afternoon, Vince leaned back in the dirt, sweat soaking through his shirt. "You know, there's a reason stuff like this doesn't show up on public records," he said, breathing hard. "If this thing was ever deployed, it wasn't on U.S. soil." Samantha sat on the fender, wiping grime from her hands with a rag. "There was something else," she said. "Inside one of the side panels, I found a strip of Velcro, like something used to be mounted there. But it's gone now. Whatever it was, someone took it." Vince looked at her carefully. "You're not planning to call this in, are you?" She didn't answer, because she wasn't sure. This vehicle wasn't just a machine. It was a ghost, engineered to survive, hidden to be forgotten, and found by the one person too stubborn to leave it buried. And now, it was waking up. The next few days blurred into a rhythm Samantha hadn't felt since her first rebuild at 16. Eat, work, sleep. Except now, the stakes were different. Every bolt she loosened from the strange vehicle seemed to whisper history no one had dared to write down. She found herself talking to it, not in words, exactly, but in touch. In the way her fingers traced the joints, how her tools clicked against the frame. It was like trying to understand a foreign language, with only half the alphabet. She kept the vehicle in the far bay of her garage, behind closed doors. No one saw it but her and Vince. And even Vince had started keeping a wary distance. On the fourth morning, she slid underneath the chassis to inspect a dented panel near the rear axle. She tapped it gently. It sounded hollow. Strange, considering the rest of the machine felt like a tank. She grabbed her grinder and carved a slow, shallow arc around the dent. A section of the undercarriage dropped loose with a soft clink. Her heart kicked. Inside, the cavity wasn't machinery. It was storage. A compartment maybe 16 inches deep, sealed with foam padding, crushed and stained by time. Inside it, a stack of shredded papers, some water-damaged, others brittle and yellowed. And beneath the debris, wrapped in a torn nylon pouch, a single Polaroid photograph. She sat up slowly, dust clinging to her arms and face. Her gloves left smudges on the photo's surface as she turned it toward the light. It showed a boy, maybe 10 years old, standing beside the same vehicle, unmistakably the same sloped body and camo green. The background looked like a military testing site, bare dirt, fencing, a faded concrete bunker. The boy was smiling, squinting into the sunday. He wore a pilot's helmet 2 sizes too big. On the back, written in faded ink, "Daniel, Camp Granger, Summer 2005. Samantha stared at it, her throat suddenly dry. She'd never heard of Camp Granger. Not in any document, not in any forum. She pulled out her laptop, wiped the dust from her fingers, and typed it in. Nothing. Not a single match. She tried combinations: Granger Military, Granger Training Base, Granger Prototype Testing. Still nothing. The place didn't exist. Or maybe, like the vehicle, it was erased. When she told Vince, he didn't even blink, just leaned against the wall with a sigh. "Whatever this thing is," he said. "They didn't just build it and hide it. They buried everything around it." Samantha looked back toward the photo in her hand. A boy smiling in front of something that should have never been seen again. A memory trapped in steel. The welds on this vehicle weren't just structural. They were intentional, seamless. As if someone had wanted to seal not just a machine, but a chapter of history. And now she had cracked it open. By the 5th day, Samantha had stripped the entire outer shell off the vehicle. What remained was its skeleton, a tight, complex fusion of armor plating and an internal chassis system unlike anything she'd seen. No engine, in the traditional sense. Instead, a matte black power core encased in silver bracing dead center beneath the cockpit. It pulsed with a quiet, unreadable energy. Not active, but not cold either. It looked less like an engine and more like a heart. She circled it slowly, flashlight in hand, pausing every few steps. The casing had no fasteners, no visible seams. Just a faint logo etched into one side, not military, not corporate. A simple, geometric triangle, intersected by a broken line. The kind of symbol that doesn't come from branding, but from Black Ops designations. Vince stood a few feet back, arms crossed. "That's not gasoline, or diesel, not even hybrid." Samantha didn't look up. "No," he leaned in. "You ever seen a superconductive plate with that texture?" "Nope." "You ever feel static electricity coming off an engine that's not running?" She stood. "Vince, what are you saying?" He hesitated. This wasn't built for transportation. It was built for control. The words hung in the air like brake dust. They opened a side panel that led beneath the core housing. What they found there made her skin crawl. Fiber optic bundles, dozens of them, routed into the body like veins. Not for diagnostics, not for communication, but for response. This machine wasn't just reactive. It was aware. Samantha stared at the core again, eyes narrowed. Why would someone build a vehicle like this and then just abandon it? Vince's voice lowered. Maybe it scared them. They didn't speak after that, just worked. Wiring diagrams were reverse engineered and drawn by hand. Every removed component was logged and photographed. Samantha cataloged everything in a notebook, just in case someone ever came knocking and demanded proof she'd found it this way, which she was beginning to suspect they would. That night, long after Vince had left, Samantha sat cross-legged on the shop floor. The Polaroid of the boy lay beside her wrench tray. The shredded documents had yielded nothing but burned fragments of what looked like testing logs and partial serial codes. But the core sat in the dark, silent and patient. It was a machine designed to outlive its makers. She placed her hand gently on the cold black casing. "I don't know what you were made for," she whispered, "but I'm going to find out." And somewhere deep inside the stillness of the garage, no beeps, no clicks, no lights. The faintest vibration passed through the casing, like a breath. It started with the sound of tires crunching gravel, slow, deliberate, heavy. Samantha looked up from her workbench, heart skipping. The sun had just begun to dip behind the trees, casting long amber streaks across the concrete floor of the garage. She stepped toward the bay doors and caught a glimpse of 2 black SUVs pulling into the lot. New, tinted, quiet. She wiped her hands and calmly set her tools down. The engines cut off. No one got out right away. When they did, 2 men stepped out from the driver's side of each vehicle. Matching black suits, close-cropped hair, hands empty but posture tight. Not local, not police. Not anyone she recognized, and she knew everyone in a 50-mile radius. One of them approached, his face unreadable, voice smooth. "Miss Hayes?" She nodded, arms crossed. "We're with a federal oversight team working in conjunction with Homeland Security." He paused, letting the air hang heavy. "We're conducting a follow-up on a misplaced government asset. We believe it may have surfaced in your possession." Samantha's throat tightened. She fought to keep her expression neutral. "A vehicle?" she asked. The second man, taller and wearing leather gloves despite the heat, stepped forward. "Yes. Seized recently from a storage facility in Dawson County. Contents unknown. We have reason to believe it was miscategorized during auction and may contain sensitive material." Samantha narrowed her eyes. "You saying I bought government property by accident?" "We're saying you may be in possession of something dangerous," the first man said, tone softening. "And we'd like to help secure it. For your safety and everyone else's." For a moment, she considered telling them everything about the power core, the Polaroid, the flash of current she'd felt through the casing. But something in their eyes stopped her. They weren't here to help. They were here to clean up. She shook her head. Only thing in that unit was some moldy chairs and an old toolbox. Nothing military, nothing valuable. They didn't move, just stared. One of them let the silence stretch out until it was nearly unbearable. Finally, the gloved one pulled a card from his coat and placed it gently on her workbench. "If anything comes to mind," he said, "call that number." And without another word, both men returned to their vehicles, doors closing in perfect sync. The engines hummed back to life, and the SUVs rolled away without a single tire squeal. Gone. Just like that. Samantha didn't pick up the card. Not right away. She walked to the back of the shop, past the shadowed outline of the strange vehicle under the tarp. She stood there a long time, hand resting against the canvas. Whatever was buried in that steel beast, it wasn't just tech. It was classified. And now, she had a choice. Hand it over and forget it ever existed, or keep digging and find out what someone clearly didn't want her to know. She looked down at her hand. It was shaking, but not with fear, with purpose. The garage was dead silent the following night except for the soft hum of Samantha's laptop and the ticking of her overhead clock. Vince hadn't returned since the visit. Understandable. Two men in black with questions that weren't really questions had a way of sending people into quiet retreat. But not Samantha. She hadn't stopped working. She'd gone back to the internal core, scanning every surface, tracing every cable and data port. There were no ignition systems, no start button, but there was one rectangular cavity beneath the interface sphere, about the size of a deck of cards. Empty, but clearly designed to hold something. A module? A key? Or maybe both? She pried off a small panel on the floor of the cockpit, hoping for more clues. Instead, she found insulation foam. Under that, a shallow recess lined in metal and nestled inside, something tightly sealed in a hardened, rubberized pouch. Thermal protected, vacuum packed. Her hand stopped. She pulled it out gently and set it on her workbench. Used a razor to slice it open. Inside, a flash drive. Just that. Matte black. Unmarked. She plugged it into a secure, air-gapped laptop she kept for diagnostics. One she'd never connected to the internet. It took a moment to mount. Then a folder appeared on the screen. Ghost Runner. Her breath caught. Inside were blueprints. Dozens. Complex CAD files, wiring schematics, system flowcharts. This wasn't just a vehicle. It was a program. At the top of the file tree was a document labeled Operation Ghost Runner, Revision 3. She opened it. The first line read, designed for autonomous traversal, silent insertion, and remote field extraction. For use in denied environments under total blackout protocol. Another line, driver optional. Interface designed for adaptive AI co-pilot activation. Quantum learning node installed within Pilot Core. She scrolled further. A table labeled Test Subjects caught her eye. All names redacted, except one. Daniel R. Status. Incomplete. Terminated. Camp Granger. 2005. Her heart turned cold. Daniel. The boy from the photograph. She pulled the Polaroid from her notebook and stared at it under the light. The faint outline of the vehicle behind him. The same vehicle that now sat in her garage, cloaked in dust and shadows. He hadn't just posed next to it. He was inside the project. Samantha sat back, palms on her thighs, trying to breathe through the storm spinning in her mind. This wasn't an abandoned prototype. It was a classified operation. And she had uncovered the only physical proof it ever existed. And now it was in her hands. The core in the vehicle, that strange humming box of sealed steel and power, wasn't waiting for an engine start. It was waiting for a command. And that flash drive might just be the key to waking it up. Samantha leaned forward and whispered to no one. To the machine. To Daniel. To the void itself. Let's see what you remember. Samantha waited until after midnight. If this went sideways, she didn't want an audience. She locked the garage, closed the outer gate, and shut off every light except a single overhead bulb above the vehicle's cockpit. The rest of the world fell into shadow. The flash drive sat in her hand, heavier than it should have been. Not physically, but with the weight of everything it might unleash. She climbed into the cockpit and knelt beside the central console. Her fingers found the rectangular cavity again, a slot lined in alloy and fiber, like it had been carved with absolute precision. No instructions, no diagrams, just trust. She inserted the drive. At first, nothing happened. Then, with a sound so soft it felt like a breath, the interface sphere lit up. Pale blue light bloomed across the screen. No boot-up sequence, no logo. Just a quiet activation like the machine had recognized her. The sphere pulsed once. Then again, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Then came the first line of text. System core. Initializing. Identity lock. Override. Engaged. User. Unknown. Status. Pilot seat detected. Awaiting input. Samantha swallowed. Her palms were damp. She reached out and rested her fingers lightly on the control sphere. Instantly, the cockpit lit up with soft panels of data, real-time diagnostics, environmental readings, battery core output. Everything booted as if the vehicle had been waiting to be touched. She didn't move. The sphere pulsed under her hand, like it was testing her presence, learning from her grip. Then, the central screen cleared again, and a new message appeared. Query. Engage system test? Yes. No. She didn't hesitate. She whispered. Yes. A low hum built beneath her, deep in the frame. The vehicle's body vibrated slightly, as if exhaling after years of silence. Panels lit in sequence, from front to rear. Hydraulic lines pulsed faintly. The energy core, the one she hadn't dared to touch, glowed from within, a soft, deep, white-blue light swirling in its center. The wheels twitched. The front suspension adjusted itself. And then, the vehicle spoke. Not with words, not in voice, but through a message centered on the display. Autonomous co-pilot online. Driver connection. Stable. Ghost runner system ready. Samantha's breath caught in her throat. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the tin sides of the garage. Inside, the vehicle now felt alive, no longer a relic or a mystery. It was operational, fully aware, fully responsive. She reached for the control sphere again, rotating it gently. The dashboard responded instantly, translating the movement into wheel direction, angle shift, even terrain mapping. It was intuitive, like the machine wasn't just reacting, but predicting her thoughts. Samantha eased her foot onto the pedal. The engine or whatever powered it didn't roar. It hummed, smooth, silent, like stealth incarnate. She looked up at the screen, where a final line of text had formed. Pilot designation not found. Assign identity? She typed with trembling fingers. S. Hayes. A pause. Then one final word. Welcome. The video wasn't meant to go viral. It was just a test. A simple perimeter run behind the garage, caught on Samantha's backup camera system. She hadn't even realized the footage was uploading until her phone started buzzing 2 days later. At first, just comments, then messages, then numbers. She didn't recognize lighting up her screen one after another. She opened her laptop. Someone had found the footage night vision quality video of a strange armored vehicle moving soundlessly through trees. No engine noise, no headlights, just a low hum and shape-shifting heat signature. The video had been captioned, Black Site Tech. What is this machine? Over 800,000 views. In under 12 hours. By morning, it had cracked 2 million. And by midday, they came again. Not in SUVs this time, but in marked vehicles. DHS, DOD. One woman in a sharp blazer. 2 men in tactical gear. They stood in her driveway like they owned the air around them. Calm, collected, cold. She didn't answer the door. They waited an hour. When they left, they slid an envelope under the door. Inside, a formal cease and desist. A demand for return of federal property. A threat of seizure under national defense protocols. And somehow attached to the letter, a still image from inside her garage. Someone had eyes on her. Samantha locked the doors, drew the shades, and backed the vehicle into the deepest bay of her garage, covered it, disarmed the drive, hid the Polaroid and flash drive in a safe only she knew the combination to. Vince called, his voice low and clipped. You need to bury it. I can't. They won't just ask politely again, Sam. She stared at the envelope. I didn't break in. I didn't steal it. I bought it fair and square. That's not how this works, and you know it. She hung up. An hour later, an offer arrived, via encrypted email. Undisclosed source. Clean, minimal text. We will buy the vehicle and all materials. 7 figures. No questions asked. No trace. She stared at the message, mouth dry. That much money could change her entire life. Fix her shop, Pay off the land. Start fresh. She hovered her finger over the keyboard, and then glanced at the photo taped above her workstation. Daniel, smiling in front of the vehicle. His name buried in redacted files. A life erased, except for this machine. She couldn't do it. Not for money. Not for silence. Because she hadn't just found a weapon. She had found a story someone died trying to tell. And as she sat there in the quiet dark of her garage, the machine powered down and sleeping, she made her decision. She wouldn't bury it. She'd finish it, even if the whole world came knocking. The morning was unusually quiet. Fog clung low to the earth, curling around the tires of the Ghost Runner like it was reluctant to let go. Samantha stood in the garage doorway, thermos in hand, staring at the machine beneath its canvas like it was a sleeping giant one that had chosen her as its keeper. No more strangers had come in the night. No knocks. No emails. But that didn't mean eyes weren't still watching. She'd spent the past 2 days pulling every trace of external data off her systems. Burned the letter. Disabled every camera. This wasn't paranoia. It was survival. Inside, the vehicle waited. Not dormant. Just listening. She removed the tarp slowly, folding it with care. The metallic shell beneath was still flawless, unmarred by age or exposure. The paint shimmered under the dim morning light. It had no license. No legal identity. But it had purpose, and now, so did she. She opened the cockpit and stepped inside. The flash drive was already seated. The system came alive without prompt. Screens glowing softly around her. This time, there was no hesitation. User S. Hayes verified. Mission status undefined. Input command. She took a breath. Then typed one word. Run. The machine responded instantly. Suspension systems flexed. Panels shifted. The core glowed from within, brighter than before, like it knew this was the beginning, not a test. Samantha gripped the control sphere, and the bay doors slid open, letting in a sheet of white morning light. The Ghost Runner rolled forward, not with a roar, but with silence. A new kind of power. It glided onto the gravel like a shadow. No noise, no warning, just velocity and grace. She took it slow at first. Navigated the back roads behind the property, surrounded by pine and fog. The system adapted seamlessly, predicting terrain changes, adjusting torque and wheel angle with precision no human engineering could match. And with every curve, every twist, Samantha felt it not just control, but connection. The machine wasn't responding. It was cooperating. After 15 minutes, she pulled back into the garage. The Ghost Runner slid to a stop with elegant silence. The screens dimmed, and then a final message appeared. Mission profile. Awaiting purpose. Primary objective. Pilot discretion. Samantha stared at the words. Not a destination. Not a command. Just a choice. She climbed out, walked around to the rear, and paused. There along a seam she hadn't noticed before she saw a faint engraving. Not etched by machine. By hand. Small. Intentional. Barely visible. It read, "To the one who finds her finish what we started." Dr. Daniel. It wasn't just his story now. It was hers. She stepped back, eyes wide, heart full. The government could keep their threats. The money could rot in someone else's vault. What she had was rarer than either. Truth. And the courage to carry it forward. Samantha Hayes didn't set out to become a legend. She just bought a storage unit on a whim. But what she found inside wasn't salvage. It was memory. It was invention. It was a question meant for a future bold enough to answer it. And now, behind locked doors and a quiet garage, she had become something more than a mechanic. She had become a steward of a secret. A pilot of something the world had tried to forget. And as she looked at the Ghost Runner one last time, before shutting down the bay lights, she whispered, "Let them come. I'm ready."